Rising up the middle. He's in! Utah leads. Daniels for the win. Caught. It's gone. LSU does it. Mason Taylor.
How's it going, everybody? I am Colin Bashnagel here on YouTube for you, but also, of course, podcast. Harry gave you the podcast intro over there, and you can see my tag right here, pointing the wrong way. My tag right here, Bash a CFB show on TikTok. You're going to see all these schedule predictions right after this. I'm going to, make some TikToks here to get the shortened schedule predictions. But even more than that, I make videos throughout. I got a bunch of videos archived, like way too many, and some with some good interactions. I definitely had some good debate where I got the better of some people in some debate. In other situations, hey, I was wrong and I got clowned for it. So if you want to tell me how dumb I am or how dumb some of my takes are, make sure you go to TikTok. But you can also comment down below here on YouTube to be able to interact about, hey, guess what? This is just not happening. You are too high or too low on Baylor. They're going to be a lot better. But regardless, we all have opinions here. I'm just sharing mine. I'm presenting as best as I can. So make sure you like and subscribe and check out this playlist up here. I know it's a little bit messy back there. I should have cleaned that up, but that's fine. Check out the playlist up here for the rest of the videos that are going to be posted up here. All right, the Baylor Bears. That's who we're talking about today. And we're going to start with players leaving, key departures. Ben Simmons, the tight end, off to the NFL. I'll talk about that tight end position a little bit more. Offensive tackle, Connor Galvin. We'll talk again about the offensive line here for the Baylor Bears. He is gone as well. And then actually drafted in the NFL is Siaki Ika, defensive tackle, impactful interior defensive lineman in the last 2 years for the Baylor Bears. He is gone to the NFL. All right, transferring out, you got to start with quarterback Kyron Drones. He's going out to Virginia Tech. Kind of hurts the depth a little bit, I guess, for the Baylor quarterback room. Craig Williams, Louisiana Tech is his landing spot, the running back there. Wide receivers, Jalen Ellis going to Colorado, Josh Fleeks going to Nebraska, and Elijah Bean. Still don't know where he's going to go. And finally, Seth Jones to USF. But, yeah, no exact Elijah Bean, no location or destination listed for him yet. Interior offensive lineman Micah Mazkua is going off to Florida, and that's it for the offense. Now, defense, they only had 3 transfers, but all 3 of them were impactful players on this team last year, specifically these 2 that I'm about to talk about. Lorando Johnson, a cornerback, one of the starting corners last year, going to Arkansas. Definitely a tough loss for them. Even tougher, I feel like, is safety Devin Neal, certainly a security blanket back there. We're going to talk about the secondary in depth. Also, Alfahim Walcott is gone. He was an impactful safety for them as well. And then Noah Rauschenberg is gone as a kicker to North Texas. So that covers who transferred out. Now we're going to talk about transferring in and the transfers that are coming in. Start with quarterback Sawyer Robertson from Mississippi State. Depth building right there, along with R.J. Martinez from Northern Arizona. Running back Dominic Richardson, a big pickup for from Oklahoma State for this Baylor team. Just to add, again, more depth. He was a pretty good running back from Oklahoma State. And then Kedron Jackson Jr. coming in from Arkansas. He was a pretty solid receiver for Arkansas, so that was a big get for Baylor in the transfer portal just for reliability purposes. Jake Roberts from North Texas, the 1-2 punch at tight end with Varkey's Gums, who's also going to Arkansas. He's coming in. Offensive tackle Campbell Barrington is coming in from BYU. Same with his brother, interior offensive lineman Clark Barrington, coming in from BYU. They come in together, and that's going to be good for continuity for sure, because I do think that both of these guys are going to start. Clark, probably a center. Campbell, probably the left tackle. We'll talk about the offensive line a little bit more in a bit as we break down the roster. On the defensive side, they brought in edge rusher from Oregon, Traven Ma'e, and I think Ma'e is a pretty solid player, a good pickup for this defense. 2 linebackers coming in, Byron Vaughns from Utah State and Mike Smith from Liberty. Isaiah Dunson coming in from Miami, a Johnny Carter coming in, cornerback from Utah State. And finally, kicker Jack Stone coming in from Michigan State. All right, breakout players to watch out for on this Baylor roster. I'm going to start with tight end Kelsey Johnson. He had some moments last year. He's a big guy, a tight end to block, but he also, is able to – he played a little bit of fullback, so he had a rushing touchdown, I know, against TCU. He's very versatile, very big, very physical, and even if he doesn't get the receptions, he's going to be crucial to this run game that Jeff Grimes is going to try to have. Now, wide receiver Jordan Neighbors, again, not a whole lot of moments last year. This is a guy that we probably don't know about too much, but he can be used in a jet sweep type of situation. He's a speedster. I expect for him to kind of be sort of a Swiss Army knife in that wide receiver room, being able to play slot or the Z. A kid from Rockwall, Texas. He's going to be a pretty solid player. I think is going to have a lot bigger of a role in this offense this upcoming year. Same with Josh Cameron, but we'll talk about them in a second. And finally, cornerback Tevin Williams going into year 2 in the system had a few moments in kind of garbage time last year. I think him as a redshirt sophomore needs to take a big step up and be somewhat of a breakout player for this team to have success. Talking about this roster breakdown, Sawyer Robertson's going to be the backup quarterback to Blake Shapen. RJ Martinez probably going to battle for that second spot, but there's a reason why they had to bring these guys in, especially with having Austin Novosad at the last second decommit and go and commit to Oregon. They bring back Richard Reese, who as a freshman, nearly 1,000 yards. He was a really, really good player, and partnering him with Dominic Richardson. This is going to be with Jeff Grimes, an offensive coordinator and offensive line guy. This is going to be a run-heavy, physical, pound the ball down your throat type of team. Now you talk about the wide receiver room. Keetron Jackson Jr. is going to be the headliner at the X position with Josh Cameron backing him up as a guy that you can have confidence in. Hal Presley, back from last year as well. Really good wide receiver last season. I'm going to scroll these stats. Kind of forgot to do that, but he's back. Also, definitely good returning production with Hal Presley and then Monterey Baldwin coming back for yet another year. Both those guys, the two leaders in this wide receiver room as far as returning production goes. Now, of course, Monterey Baldwin, the leader in that camp, as a guy who can play the Z, can play the slot a little bit. He's mostly a slot guy, but he can be out there in 12 personnel situations as well. I like their tight end room, 3 deep with Drake Dabney and Jake Roberts there, but also, again, Kelsey Johnson being utilized in multiple different ways as a physical, bigger player. He's a really good one. All right, the offensive line, I hinted at this earlier. I love what they have on the offensive line. Their tackles, Elijah Ellis and Campbell Barrington, 2 guys that you can absolutely count on. And the interior is something you can count on with Gavin Byers and Clark Barrington as guard and center, left guard and center. That right guard position, a little bit up for battle. Ryan Lingell is going to try to push for that position, but it looks like Tate Williams is going to be the starter. But you have 4 of your 5 positions certainly solidified, and I think this Baylor offensive line is going to be tailor-made for what Jeff Grimes is going to do. Don't look now, but this Baylor offense might be really, really good just based on how they're going to be able to run the ball and throw the ball with the weapons that they have on the outside, being just a tick better from a year ago. All right, talking about the defense, you can't talk about this defense without starting with a guy in Gabe Hall who has been there for a very long time, and then Garmin Randolph. Garmin Randolph, second, I believe, on the team in sacks, and I think that he has a potential to be the star of this defense here, a defense that I'm not sure is going to be all that great, but they're definitely super linebacker heavy. Now, we'll talk about the linebackers in a second. You have Jarrell Boykins also in the middle, Trey Emery, David Marshall are going to look to push for playing time. Cooper Lands and TJ Franklin on one edge for sure, and Tony Onwu is a guy to watch out for as well on the edge, getting some rotational playing time. But Garmin Randolph, he's the star of this front 7, specifically the pass rushing ability that he has is something to highlight. All right, Matt Jones and Mike Smith Jr. are both back at linebacker. Then you're going to have Bryson Jackson at that hybrid role in the slot corner position. I kind of skimmed over linebacker a little bit. It's a really deep group with Brooks Miller and Josh White also back for another year. And then you have Bryson Jackson, like I mentioned, in that kind of nickel hybrid spot. And that's important to have that experience because they do not have a whole lot of that experience elsewhere in that secondary. You're probably looking at a first-time starter in Tevin Williams, who, again, had playing time last year, but it was somewhat limited because of the fact that they had a bunch in the secondary and they lost those couple of players. When you're talking about Devin Neal, Lorendo Johnson, and Walcott all leaving the program, the secondary has been left bare. Devin Leamer is a guy to watch for at the safety position along with Devin Bobby. So the two Devins look to develop. Devin Bobby, a true freshman last year, hardly played at all. He's going to be thrust into a starting position. Young guys are just going to be starting on the secondary. It's definitely a point of concern, especially early in the season. So keep that in mind as we predict the schedule. Palmer Williams is probably going to be your punter, while Jack Stone is your kicker, both in kickoff and place kicker. Maybe Isaiah Hankins can do one of those two roles, but it seems like Jack Stone is your guy. All right, the over-under win total here for Baylor is 7.5 wins. You could get good odds at 6.5 for the over, but the under is definitely juiced a little bit at 7.5. You probably want to, meet in the middle with 7, but overall, if you can get an over of 6.5 juice towards the over, do it. Okay. It's juiced towards the over is 7.5. If you have confidence that they're going to be 8+ wins, do it here, right? If you have confidence that they're going to struggle to make a bowl game, you might want to take that juice at about plus 150 for the 6.5. But the general consensus is putting that line at 7.5. All right, taking a look at the schedule prediction right now for the Baylor Bears. Their schedule is very interesting. They have out of conference against Utah coming up now. Texas State, I think they could be a decent team out of the Sun Belt, very middle of the road right there. Nothing to sleepwalk through, but I think Baylor should have no problem beating Texas State. Then Utah comes into McLean Stadium. Now, Utah is going to have all their eggs in one basket for week 1, and that is the Florida Gators. I think this is going to be a physical game. Utah, not necessarily the mold that would be able to beat Baylor early on in the season. Certainly going to Waco helps the Baylor Bears. This is going to be a noon game, an early start, or 11 Central, I should say, an early start for the Utah Utes, a lot earlier than they are accustomed to. I think the fact that they do not have an explosive passing game, I like Cam Rising. I think he's a good college quarterback, but the lack of explosiveness on the outside is something Baylor can cover, and I have Baylor upsetting Utah in McLean Stadium before beating LIU, no problem. If West Virginia is able to hang, 70 on LIU, you should have no problem. West Virginia is bad. Then you play Texas, and I think this is going to be a hype matchup based on the fact that Baylor does beat Utah. I think Baylor at this point is certainly going to be ranked, especially if Utah, their one loss through the first 3 games is just the Baylor Bears. Texas is going to throw the ball all over the place on Baylor. I think this is where Baylor's secondary really gets exposed. The questions that they have, the youth that they have, again, they're going to be strong at the point of attack, but I think Texas is going to be a lot more physical than they were last year, just like they were more physical last year than they were the year prior. I think they're going to keep taking steps in the right direction. I think Steve Sarkisian is building that the right way, and I think Texas is going to hang a bunch of points, and this game's not going to be close, and it's going to be a disappointment for Baylor, and I think they let Texas beat them twice with having to go up against UCF, even though I don't think UCF's going to have a super explosive passing game. I think having to deal with that team speed that UCF is going to have is going to be tough. I think it's a close game. I think it's actually kind of high scoring with the way that Baylor can pound the rock, and I think they're going to out-physical UCF a little bit when it comes to offense versus defense for Baylor, but I do think UCF is going to have big plays and use that team speed, and I think that's going to be able to pull off their own upset of themselves in Orlando. In the bounce house, I have UCF winning that game. And then Texas Tech also beats you. Again, a team that can throw the ball around the yard if Tyler Shuck is healthy, with how Joey McGuire has been building this program with pretty solid defense too. The way that they closed out the year against Texas or against Ole Miss last year as well. I have a lot of optimism for what this Red Raiders team could be here. And even though you start off hot with 3 straight wins, including that upset win against Utah, I think Baylor responds with their first 3 conference games, all 3 being losses, before having a bye right in the middle of your schedule. Off the bye, you play at Cincinnati, and I think you get a big win. Now, if you were traveling all the way out east to Cincinnati with it being a full 1 week to work with, that would give me a little bit more question, but I do not buy into what Scott Satterfield has. I'm not a big buyer of what Cincinnati is going to be as far as talent goes this year in comparison to what Luke Fickell had 2 years ago. A lot of people are seeing Cincinnati in the same light that they were 2 years ago. I'm seeing Cincinnati a lot closer to what they were Luke Fickell's first year than Luke Fickell's even last year, but let alone the playoff year, which is what a lot of people see Cincinnati at. I think Baylor marches in to Nippert Stadium and beats the Cincinnati Bearcats to improve to 4-3. Iowa State, going to be a really tough game. I think Iowa State's one of those middle-of-the-road Big 12 teams that could catch anybody in the conference on the right day especially. They're going to have a decent passing offense. They're going to have a better run game as well, and they're going to play physical defense. I'm going on a limb here and saying that Iowa State comes into McLean Stadium and pulls off the upset, a slight upset. I'm assuming that Baylor is going to be about a touchdown favorite, maybe a little bit less than a touchdown favorite against Iowa State. I think that the Baylor Bears fall again. And I think the secondary is a big part of that. Now, I could easily see them winning that game, and I know for a fact I'm going to have them beating Houston, which is just a mess. I mean, Dana Holgorsen, his year was supposed to be last year, right? And it ended up kind of crashing and burning, and now they're jumping to the Big 12 with not a whole lot of talent, a lot of that talent wanting to leave. And, you know, I'm just not sure what they're going to have now. Donovan Smith is there at quarterback, and do I see a path for Houston to make a bowl game in their first year in the Power 5? I could see a path to that, but I'm not going to predict it because I don't trust what Dana's got going on down there, and I think they're somewhat of a disaster. At Kansas State, this is going to be a loss. They're going to be physical with Chris Kleiman there at, in another year. Pardon me, I've kind of slipped up there. I believe this is upcoming year 5 or 6 for Chris Kleiman. And, they were a really physical team last year with a lot of success that Colin Klein has been able to have. We were just talking about Colin Klein at Kansas State. And we were also just talking about Chandler Morris today. Make sure you go and check out that show on the Lowdown Network. Now, at TCU, I also think is going to be a loss. I want to kind of save what I have to say about Kansas State and TCU for their own previews themselves. I think they're both still going to be really, really good teams, even if they've lost some good players on their teams. Watch out for TCU, okay? They're not going to be a bad team whatsoever. So you're going 5-6 into that West Virginia game. It's a must-win if you want to go back to a bowl game in which you had a disappointing end to your season because of the bowl game against Air Force. That was a physical and nasty game against the Air Force Falcons. But I think you get back bowling and you get another chance to play in a similar level bowl game by beating West Virginia. Now, here's what I'm going to tell you with Baylor. I am not going to predict the over-under at all, okay? Because even though I have Baylor sitting here at 6-6, 3-6 in conference, this could easily be a team that surprises everybody for sure. If that secondary definitely is not as much of a liability as I'm giving it, and I think TCU, Kansas State, Texas Tech, those 4 teams specifically should be able to be equipped to expose that secondary. In those 4 games, I'm pretty concerned about Baylor in because of the style of play that we know those 4 teams are going to bring to the table. Now, if that secondary, the concerns are addressed, or rather just not as much of a concern as I'm making it out to be, I think this Baylor offense can really score this year. And I think that's where you could see games like Iowa State flip, like a Texas Tech even at home and a UCF on the road flip. I think that could be the path to where you give Texas, Kansas State, TCU a game, right? It's because that offense can absolutely score. And I think this Baylor offense is going to take a level up. I think they're going to have a really good rush offense in the second year with Richard Reese and Dominic Richardson, and this offensive line being really, really talented and really, really good. This Baylor offense is something I really like. This Baylor secondary is what could be their Achilles heel. So, Dave Aranda, I'm asking you this. can you please answer the question pretty early on? And we're going to have to wait until week 4 against Texas or week 6 against Texas Tech. Is your secondary going to be a liability, or are they able to play up the standard this year? That's going to be my question about Baylor as I look to them. They could easily be a team that's 9-10 wins around that point if that secondary is good. So with that being said, guys, thank you guys for tuning in. I really appreciate it. Make sure you guys like and subscribe. Check out what we have at the Lowdown Network. And the rest of you guys, have a good day. We'll see you.